𝐾𝐨𝐰𝐧𝐥𝐨𝐚𝐝 is an extremist group in news. This group is a meaty extremist group which is responsible for most of the violence which occurred in Manipur from May of 2023, which has led to nearly 200 casualties and 50,000 people being displaced in Manipur. The organization's influence at one point of time extended to the place wherein it forced multiple MLAs across Manipur to take a pledge supporting its chauvinistic agenda, which is Manipur belongs to the Meiteis alone. In fact, this is the group which is behind most of the communal strife and violence against the 𝐾𝐞𝐨𝐽𝐧𝐥𝐨 who live in the mountainous region of Manipur. In fact, the group was involved in arms snatching from the Indian state agencies, and along with that, it is also involved in conducting multiple violent protests, and some of the group members were also accused of naked parading of 𝐾𝐞𝐨𝐽𝐧𝐥 women in the valley of Manipur. So this group, when it was in full influence, the political party at the state was not able to take any action against them. Because of which reason, the state government was finally suspended by the central government and a president's rule is imposed. Now, the Central Bureau of Investigation is arresting most of the top leaders of this 𝐾𝐨𝐼𝐧𝐥𝐨 group, and this is leading to again renewed strife in the Manipur region. The primary reason for this is, even though it is an extremist group, it enjoys the community support among the Meiteis, but unless these people are arrested and punished for the crimes that they have committed, no peace can prevail in Manipur, as justice is a precondition for peace, not an outcome of it. UN Office on Disaster Risk Reduction has started a new social media campaign. It is the campaign with an hashtag of no natural disaster. In fact, the UN Office on Disaster Risk Reduction is of the opinion that there are no natural disasters at all. In fact, it is saying that there might be natural hazards, but all disasters are essentially man-made, primarily because a hazard can translate into a disaster when there is no preparedness and protection to the local communities. In fact, the UN Office on Disaster Risk Reduction is of the opinion that disaster is nothing but hazard plus exposure plus vulnerability. It means that hazards, particularly natural hazards like earthquake, volcanoes, can happen at any point of time. But the exposure of community to these kind of hazards and their vulnerability are the factors which convert the hazard into a disaster, and without them, there cannot be any natural disasters. That is the reason why the UNDRR office, it is stating that exposure and vulnerability should be minimized as part of a risk reduction strategy. Exposure is nothing but not adequately protecting the local population from a disaster, and at the same time, vulnerability is nothing but as a result of poverty, exclusion or social disadvantage. If the local community gets adversely affected by a hazard, then only it will get translated into a disaster. In more layman terms, an earthquake is an hazard, but the unpreparedness of the local community for the earthquake is something which leads to the problem of exposure. Then at the same time, the vulnerability aspect comes into picture when, because of poverty, because of exclusion or social discrimination, the people are unable to tolerate the impact of the disaster, then of the hazard, then it becomes vulnerability of the population. And the UNDRR office, it has started this campaign primarily to raise awareness among the people, because nomenclature or naming or labeling something usually has a political agenda behind it. Whenever you call a disaster as a natural disaster, then it also leads to shrugging off the responsibility for the disaster, because in our mind automatically it is registered as if we cannot do anything in face of natural disaster. But the most important thing here that we need to understand is, even though hazard might be natural, the exposure and vulnerability are human factors which can be minimized. That is the reason why the UN Disaster Risk Reduction Office, it has created a framework which is called as Sendai Framework for DRR, which is applicable from the year 2015 to 2030. And this framework, it in fact tries to reduce the risk of the disaster. And the earlier framework, that is the HYGO framework for action between 2005 to 2015, it focused on disaster management. But the new framework, that is Sendai framework, it is focusing on disaster risk reduction. And it is our responsibility to stop the hazards from becoming a disaster. And that is the reason why there is a need for early warning, safety planning, disaster resilient infrastructure. All of these things needs to be focused upon. In Hyderabad's 𝐃𝐨𝐰𝐧𝐥𝐨𝐚𝐝, on Sunday morning, numerous fishermen have started burning heaps of fish. In fact, it sounds very counterintuitive. Why will the fishermen go to the extent of catching the fish in order to burn them? But the real reason for this burning is a fish which is called as armored sailfin catfish, which is also known in the region of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana as Rakshasi fish, or it is also called as devil's fish. This is an invasive species in Eastern Ghats region, which originally was introduced into India as an ornamental fish for aquariums. This is a unique kind of species which has the capability to eat away the algae which is produced in the aquariums and keeping the aquariums clean. Because of this reason, it has been brought from the Amazon rainforests of South America into India. Once it is brought into India, it has converted into an invasive species and is adversely affecting more than 65% of the lakes and freshwater bodies which are present in Eastern Ghats region. In fact, this fish is called as Rakshasi fish because it has most of the characters of Rakshasas. That is, they consume the other fish. Then along with that, they overutilize the oxygen which is present in the lake environment, creating low oxygen conditions which it can survive, but the other fish cannot survive. Then along with that, it is consuming majority of the fresh hatchlings of other fish, leading to enormous growth of the population of this Rakshasi fish, whereas the other fish population is reducing drastically. And the unique aspect of this Rakshasi fish is, even though it grows to a substantial size, it is not commercially viable and consumable at all. And along with that, because it has an armor-like body around it, it is cutting most of the fishing nets of the fishermen when they go out for fishing, and the fishing nets are usually very costly. And apart from creating these problems, the fish which is the catfish or Rakshasi fish, what it is doing is, it is also destroying the food webs of most of the native fish species of India. And now there is a need for understanding the biological impact of introducing an invasive species. That is the reason why in moving species from one country to another, we should be utmost careful. Primarily because in the Amazon forest region, there is a unique habitation adaptation for this catfish, wherein they have a predator of their own. But in Indian waters, there is no predator, and because of which reason, these fishes are growing in large number, and this is leading to the destruction of the local varieties of fish. Unable to digest this invasion of the Rakshasi fish, the fishermen in 𝐃𝐨𝐼𝐧𝐥𝐴 region, they caught these fish in large number, heaped them up, and they started burning them down. And this shows the clear-cut indication of a biological disaster that is about to happen in India. In a recent report published by 𝐃𝐞𝐚𝐫𝐧𝐢𝐧𝐠, Himalayan long-tailed myotis is identified as the new bat species of India. In fact, this takes the total number of bat species in India to nearly 135 species. And the Himalayan long-tailed myotis is a very peculiar kind of bat, which is very small sized one. In fact, it weighs less than 1 ounce, and along with that, its size is also less than 3.5 inches. And this unique bat species has been identified particularly in the deodar, pine and cedar forests of the Himalayas, and the recent reporting of its sighting has happened in the Uttarakhand region of India, and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province in Pakistan. In fact, this bat species was earlier subclassified as a part of a European bat, but now, based on genetic studies, it has been put in this complex which is called as Myotis frater complex. And these bats are widely distributed across the Central and East Asian region along with China. But a subspecies of this Myotis frater is the Himalayan long-tailed Myotis. And this is a bat which has a tail of its own. And we already know that bat is a flying mammal. So even though it has a flight capability, it is a mammal species. So, and along with that, bats play a very important role in maintenance of the ecology of any region. Primarily because bats during the night time, they consume a lot many insects. And along with the insects, they also consume multiple kinds of smaller birds which can cause damage to the crops. Even though the bat is considered as a sign of inauspiciousness across the world in many civilizations, but in Indian case, the bats are very good predators of insects which can cause damage to plants. And over and above this, wherever there are some natural caves, usually the bats make it their habitat. And in these regions, because of the continuous accumulation of bat droppings, which are very rich in nitrogen and potassium, in some of the states of India, this bat droppings, which are called as guano, are being extracted and are being used as fertilizer in agriculture. Then along with that, the bats also play a very important role as pollinators, primarily because the bats have the capability to consume or pick up some fruit, consume it and take the seed to a distance and drop it. And this way, it will lead to pollination or growth of plants. And whenever they touch upon some flowers also, they spread the pollen from one flower to another, promoting the practice of cross-pollination. This way, India has in total 135 bat species, of which the new species is Himalayan long-tail Myotis. Thank you.